Intolerance in its worst sense is simply ignoring the problems of the world and judging them to accept all the evils that we know are wrong, or to condemn unknowingly. That's a form of tolerance in its own right there. A world class without the ability to judge is a barren world that has no expectations. Now consider this. Consider this in the context of judgment, krino, to judge, to decide, to discern, to evaluate, to condemn. The judgment of our mother and father, as they work with their children, as they watch their children grow up, as they guide their children, as they try to teach their children the wisdom of the life that they've lived and want to carry on to their children, to give them advice and to judge them and tell them when they're wrong and to praise them when they're right. And consider the not only the family but our friends, the judgment of our friends. It's like when I went, if I got a membership into Planet Fitness, I'm expecting some things. I'm expecting some judgment. Here's what you need. Here's what you need to do. Here's how you need to do it. And those statements are judgments on me. And I'm in there because I've judged myself that I need to be in there. So in this context of judge, I have judged myself in this case, fit or in need of this particular work, and they have judged me also in that same need, and they are taking action on it. And as you look at the judgment of our friends, as we associate with people, expectations that we have for the people around us, how they should act, what they should be, what they should aspire to, how they should conduct themselves. And the same thing with me, the things that they judge me for. They judge me on my actions and my relation to them, how I treat them. And in judging in the context of criticizing if I need that. And most importantly of all, class, and as Christ teaches in these 6 verses in the Sermon on the Mount, he teaches to judge ourselves, to evaluate ourselves, to discern ourselves. And we do this humbly. And as we go through our lives with this, we need to, at all cases, as we'll see through this lesson, always go through introspection. Look at yourself. Look at who you are, what you are. What is in my eye? What is in my eye? Is it clear? Can I see? Is there a mote or is there a beam? Without the ability to judge or decide or discern, we find ourselves adrift in a sea of loneliness. We're isolated. Without the judgment of others, we're isolated. It's like being with a ship on the sea without a rudder. But judgment, or the idea of don't judge me, seems to have taken the higher ground in this particular society. And those people who abide by this particular idea of tolerance, don't judge me, have never looked closely at what Jesus said. And we can throw some light on that and look deeper into this in a simple word study as we've talked about. Matthew 7:1 through 6 really uses the Greek word krino in the form of to judge, to evaluate, to discern. And it holds significant implications in the way we live and the way we relate to others. And so we need to go deeper into Jesus' context to understand the nuances of his judgment language. It is a common word used in the Bible. My sources says it's used 114 times in the New Testament. And it comes with an assortment of related words built on the same base. The root of the meaning is, as I've already said, is to scrutinize, to evaluate. And the basic principle of a word study is to understand that words have multiple meanings, and that in the case of krinos, it can cover a wide range of value judgments. It can mean to prefer something, to judge that you prefer something, such as, I'll have the Butterfinger Blizzard. Or as Paul said in Romans 14:5, he said, some people regard or judge some days as more important than the rest, while others regard or judge every day alike. It can be used like that. It can mean to reach a decision. In Acts 2:27-1, after Paul appealed to a hearing before Caesar, the Roman governor judged, to send him to Italy. It sometimes functions as a legal term, to be involved in court proceedings. This includes the person bringing a lawsuit, Matthew 5:40, or the person who's on trial, Acts 23:6. And it has further meaning in that it can refer to the handling of administrative affairs, such as to judge like the judges in the book of Judges. And it can mean to form an opinion. When Simon the Pharisee gave his answer to Jesus, one of Jesus' probing questions, Jesus replied, "You have judged correctly." And it also can mean to express a negative opinion about someone or something, to scrutinize unjustly or to condemn. And Jesus told his hearers, and let's look at this, Luke 6:35-38, if you would. And Jesus says, "But love your enemies, and do them good, and lend, and never despairing. And your reward shall be great, and ye shall be sons of the Most High. For he is kind toward the unthankful and the evil. Be ye merciful, even as your Father is merciful. And judge not, and ye shall not be judged. And condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned. Release, and ye shall be released. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall they give into your bosom. For with what measure you meet, it will be measured to you again." With what measure you meet, with what measure you judge in this case. And as Jesus teaches here, this is a reaffirmation of the Sermon on the Mount, as he puts this together for these. As this is your frame of mind and judgment should be, first of all, to love your enemies. Do them good. Lend things, expecting nothing in this. Your reward will be great. It says, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Your Father loves those that are unthankful, ungrateful, and evil. Do not judge, or in this case, do not condemn. As we just spoke of, to express a negative opinion about something or someone and criticize unjustly or condemn. Do not condemn. Pardon, and you will be pardoned. With what measure you meet, what measure you judge, it shall be measured to you again. Now, the word krinos also refers to the judgment or condemnation of God. And Jesus announced, "For God did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world should be saved through him." John 3:16. Jesus did not come to the world to condemn the world, as it is spoken of in the context of judgment or condemnation of God. Now, this use of judgment, the condemnation of God is different than our judgment of condemnation. There's one that can condemn, and that is God, not us. And there's one that can save, and that is Jesus. And as you look at this, it refers both to a guilty verdict and the punishment and results. But Jesus, as it says, did not come to condemn us. He didn't come to judge us in that context. He came to teach us. He came to save us. And he came in this sense through God and by the power of God and by the volition of God to give his own Son to us. Now, what a variety of ideas and values of judgment that krinos can cover, anywhere from choosing an ice cream to issuing a death sentence. Now, the second principle of a word study is to understand that a word has only one meaning in a particular context. just like judgment of condemnation that God uses refers only to God, not to man. And judgment of condemnation that man uses is referred to as Christ, as he spoke of, judge not lest you be judged. With what measure you meet, it'll be measured to you. So the two different meanings of krinos, judgment, in that case there. Judgment of God, which is pure and righteous. Judgment of man, which is not so much. Obviously, Jesus was not warning against all kinds of criticisms or evaluations in Matthew 7, 1 through 6. Almost immediately he instructs in this. He said, first, cast the beam out of your own eye. Self-evaluation, self-judgment, introspection. Clear your own eyes in this case. Move your eye, clean your eyes so that you can see the mote in your neighbor's eye. And that means judgment in that case there. But first it began with the judge, yourself. It began with the judge in the context of clearing your own vision, clearing your own mind, humbly going to God for forgiveness of sins and approaching people as one who has been forgiven of sins. And as you meet, it will be measured unto you. Forgive those in front of you that you do judge. And how could one act on the words without evaluating people to determine whether other people fit in the category of dog or swine? And in a few verses in Matthew 7:15, Jesus says, beware of false prophets. And we can only obey this command by judging their character and their message, evaluating. So now, as we move through this, we understand what Jesus was talking about. Jesus is attacking hypocrisy here, specifically the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. The Pharisees, they were the most scrupulous in observing all the minutiae of the law. But their internal attitudes failed to match the righteous facade that they put forward. They were known for condemning the behavior of anyone who failed to conform to their tight standards. They were constantly critiquing others, even though they fell far short of Christ's standard of holiness that he taught in the Sermon on the Mount. And as he continued to judge and attack this attitude in Pharisees throughout his life, in his parables and his teachings, as he worked with the disciples, as he taught them, he was giving us this cautionary tale about ourselves, about judging in the context of condemnation, not judging in context of value, or not discerning of whether it was right or whether it was wrong, or deciding that you were going to follow a particular path. That's what we do each week when we offer the invitation, is we ask people to make choices. And as we teach and as we approach people, as we develop relationships, we're imploring them to make choices that are going to be the best for them in that case. Jesus was not outlawing all discernments and moral judgments. He was condemning those who placed themselves on a pedestal, like the Pharisees, as models of morality, while their hearts were full of evil attitudes. And Jesus judged these people. He judged them for what they were. And you just need to go to Matthew 23 and the 7 woes and listen to the words that Jesus used to define the Pharisees: hypocrites, and one of my favorites, blind guides, fools, whited sepulchres full of dead men's bones. Now that is a judgment. That's not a judgment condemnation, although there is a sense of that there. But it's Christ's judgment that they are wrong and their values are wrong and they've approached the whole thing wrong, that they've missed the point. Because in this same chapter 23, he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I would have gathered you under my wings as chicks." And he's speaking specifically to the Pharisees, to the leaders, because they missed the point They missed exactly the point of what the law had taught them, that there was the Messiah coming, and that he was the Messiah, and that he could save them. And Jesus, in his judgment of these Pharisees, still, this, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem," it reminds me of what David said when he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son, Absalom. Would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son." He lamented this. He was cut to the heart of the Pharisees in their utter contempt for him and for the Word of God. So nothing is wrong with stating the truth about right and wrong, as long as the standard is God and not us. He alone has the right to set moral standards. When we confront someone, we need to communicate God's standards, not our opinions. And we must do it with respect, out of genuine concern for their physical and spiritual welfare. In short, use righteous judgment. I'll tell this story. I wasn't, but I am going to tell this story. I had a young man, this was back in the 90s. He came to class, and he had a paper clip stuck through his eyebrow. And I said, "Josh, what have you done?" He said, "Well, I'm piercing my eyebrow." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Don't judge me. It's me. I can do what I want to." And I said, "I'm not judging whether you got a paper clip in your eyebrow. I'm judging the safety of it, Josh." And he said, "Well, I can do what I want to." Yeah, well, he did. He missed 2 days of school, and when he came back, his eye was swelled shut. So, that was a case of judging, not in the sense of condemning. I wasn't condemning for that. He could do whatever he wanted to, but I was just, I knew that this was not going to bode well for him. But clearly, we were able to judge. God gave us that distinction, and Jesus endorses it, to be able to judge. John 7:24, and Jesus says, "Do not judge according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment." Righteous judgment. Now then, I think that would come to combine all the forms of krenos that we're looking at, as to, in our own way, form this idea of righteous judgment. Boy, this paper's hard to grab a hold of. And as we look at this concept of righteous judgment, let's look in the scriptures at different things that tell us what righteous judgment is. Because I can tell you, righteous judgment can be a slippery slope. As you deal with the Pharisees, in this case of this parable that I'm going to read here in Luke 18, 9 through 14, you go ahead and turn to it. It's a slippery slope. And I'll just read it now. On verse 9, he said, in verse 9, Jesus speaking, "And he also told the apostles of this parable to some people who trusted in themselves, that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and praying this to himself, 'God, I thank you that I am not like other people, swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I pay tithes that of all I get.' But the tax collector over here, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to lift his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, 'God, be merciful to me, a sinner.' I'll tell you, this man went to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted." Righteous judgment. The Pharisee was guilty of self-righteous judgment. He saw himself in this image of righteousness, in this image of goodness that put him above the tax collector. But the tax collector first, he humbled himself in the context of not even being willing to look at God, and saying and admitting to God in that particular setting, "Be merciful to me,